My golden child brother ruined my childhood, then framed and sued me after. Hi Reddit, I'm here to share something I've been holding on to for years. It's deeply personal and incredibly complicated, so I appreciate your patience and understanding as I try to unpack it all. I'm using a throwaway account because this involves my family and I don't want to risk them finding out. I'll try my best to provide a clear, chronological account. Buckle up. It's a lot. I'm a 43-year-old man, the youngest of two siblings. My brother Michael is 45. To my parents, Michael was always the golden child. He could do no wrong in their eyes. When Michael struggled in school, they supported him with tutoring, encouragement, and endless patience. But when I performed well academically, their response was muted. I didn't expect much, but the disparity was undeniable. A perfect example. When Michael graduated high school, he was given a new car and a massive party. When I graduated, a card with $300 and a brief, "good job." It was clear who their favorite was. Despite this, Michael wasn't a bad brother growing up. We didn't fight much, we just lived separate lives. He wasn't particularly kind or supportive, but he wasn't openly cruel either. After high school, I left for university in another city, determined to carve out a life for myself. It took me 7 years to complete my MBA. Juggling part-time jobs and classes wasn't easy, but I graduated and landed a solid job back in my hometown. During those years away, I kept my distance from my family. We saw each other only on holidays and birthdays. It was easier that way. Michael, on the other hand, barely made it through high school. College wasn't in the cards for him. Instead, my parents helped him open a small hardware store. They poured time, money, and energy into ensuring its success. I was genuinely happy for him, but I couldn't help noticing how their support for him contrasted sharply with their indifference toward my achievements. I stayed focused on my own life and tried not to dwell on it. In 2006, I met Emily. She was 20 at the time, and we hit it off almost instantly. We were both from the same city and had mutual friends in college. After graduating, we returned home, got jobs, moved in together, and started building a future. Things were looking up. Emily was everything I had ever wanted: kind, intelligent, and full of life. I couldn't wait to introduce her to my family. When Emily and I visited my parents for the holidays in 2008, they were unexpectedly warm and welcoming. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of belonging. However, I couldn't ignore how much Michael was staring at Emily. It was unsettling. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe I was imagining things. But as time went on, his behavior became more blatant. Michael began visiting our apartment frequently. At first, it was every few months, but soon it became a near-daily occurrence. He always showed up uninvited, usually in the evenings when Emily and I were trying to relax after work. It was intrusive and exhausting. Eventually, I had to confront him. I told him his visits needed to stop. This led to a massive fight involving our parents, who insisted I was overreacting and that Michael just wanted to bond. Reluctantly, Michael agreed to limit his visits to once every 2 months. Things settled down for a while. In 2011, I proposed to Emily. She said yes, and we celebrated with close friends and family. My parents were thrilled, but Michael's reaction was cold. He shook my hand, muttered a quick congratulations, and left early. It stung, but I tried not to dwell on it. Emily and I got married in 2013. Michael brought a date, Laura, to the wedding. It seemed like he was moving on. A year later, he and Laura tied the knot. For a while, life was peaceful. Emily and I focused on our marriage and started a family. Our first daughter, Olivia, was born in 2015, followed by Chloe in 2017. Parenthood brought us closer, and I felt truly content. But in 2016, things took a dark turn. Laura contacted me out of the blue. She confided that Michael's obsession with Emily had been a constant strain on their marriage. She claimed it was the primary reason for their impending divorce. I was stunned. I apologized to Laura and wished her the best. Later, I discussed the situation with Emily, who admitted she had always sensed tension with Laura. She described Laura as distant and cold, but she hadn't known why. I confronted Michael during a family gathering. I asked him outright why his fixation on my wife was ruining his life. He looked shocked and denied everything. The argument escalated, and I told him he was no longer welcome in my home. My parents begged me to reconsider, arguing that Michael was still family. Against my better judgment, I decided to maintain a cordial relationship for the sake of peace. By 2018, it seemed like Michael was making an effort to improve himself. He kept his distance and focused on his business. I let my guard down. Then, on July 25th, everything unraveled. That day, Emily took our daughters to visit my parents. I was running errands when I received a call from my father. His voice was tense, and he asked me to come over immediately. When I arrived, the atmosphere was chaotic. My parents were trying to console Emily, who was sobbing uncontrollably. Several extended family members were there, their faces etched with concern. My heart sank. Something was very wrong. I was accused of assaulting a girl at a party weeks prior and sending her threatening text messages to scare her into silence. When I first heard about it, I thought it had to be some kind of mix-up, a misunderstanding, or maybe even a sick joke. But the situation escalated so quickly that I barely had time to react, let alone clear my name. The girl in question, Amanda, was someone I'd known since high school. We weren't close, but we occasionally hung out as part of a larger group. She was always kind of quiet, more of a friend than someone I spent time with one-on-one. She claimed I had followed her to her car after a club party and attacked her. To back up her allegation, she provided screenshots of a conversation she claimed to have had with my wife, Emily. In these messages, Emily allegedly acknowledged the incident and told Amanda not to report it to the police. The accusations left me stunned and utterly confused. The Amanda I remembered wasn't someone I would have ever thought capable of lying about something so serious. But there it was. Her words, those screenshots, and the weight of her story spreading like wildfire among my family and friends. My father's reaction was immediate and brutal. Before I could even begin to explain myself, he slapped me across the face so hard that my ears rang. "You're no son of mine!" he spat, his voice shaking with fury. My mother, usually the more rational one, looked at me with a mixture of disgust and disappointment. "How could you?" she whispered, before turning away. They told me they never wanted to see me again. Emily, my wife, didn't hold back either. She was livid, throwing her wedding ring at me and yelling that we were done. "You disgust me," she said. "Stay away from me and the kids." She packed a few things and left with the children without so much as a backward glance. I pleaded with her to listen, to hear me out, but she was having none of it. She said she'd be filing for divorce and made it clear that any further contact would be through lawyers. My father came to my flat the next day to collect more of Emily's belongings. I begged him to reconsider, to at least let me explain my side, but he ignored me. He packed up their things, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "If you contact them again, I'll call the police myself." The threat wasn't empty. I could see the resolve in his expression. He genuinely believed I was guilty, and that broke something inside me. Things only got worse. By that evening, my brother Michael had taken it upon himself to share Amanda's story and the supposed screenshots in our extended family's WhatsApp group. Within hours, I was expelled from the group. No one reached out to ask for my side of the story. Instead, I received calls from friends, all of them angry, telling me to stay away from them and their families. One friend, someone I had considered a brother, simply said, "You're dead to me." I spiraled. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. My mind was a mess, constantly replaying everything that had happened and wondering how it had all gone so wrong. At work, rumors had started to spread. My supervisor called me into his office and told me that while he couldn't officially act on the rumors unless the police got involved, it was in my best interest to resign. He said it would protect my employment record. "If this goes public, I'll have no choice but to fire you, and it won't be clean," he said. I didn't want to resign, but the threat of being fired and the shame of the situation left me with little choice. A few days later, I handed in my resignation. By mid-August, I was barely holding on. Then, as if I hadn't already lost enough, I received 2 pieces of mail: divorce papers from Emily and a formal letter of disownment from my parents. The latter was signed by both my mother and father, and it crushed me. I didn't even recognize my family anymore. Desperate and drunk, I showed up at their house hoping to talk things through. That was a mistake. Michael confronted me as soon as I arrived. He was furious, calling me a disgrace and saying the family was better off without me. When I tried to defend myself, he snapped. He lunged at me, punching me repeatedly until I could barely stand. Blood dripped from my nose and mouth, but no one stepped in to help. My parents stood nearby, watching silently. Emily was there too, her arms crossed as she looked on with cold indifference. By the time Michael was done, I was on the ground, sobbing, my face bruised and my spirit broken. I returned to my flat and locked myself away from the world. The divorce proceeded with minimal contact between Emily and me. Given that I was unemployed, I wasn't required to pay child support or alimony, which was the only silver lining in an otherwise hellish situation. Emily assured me that she and her family would take care of the kids, and that was the end of our conversation. Officially, I was divorced by January 2019. The process had been emotionally and mentally draining, and by the time the papers were signed, I felt like a shell of my former self. I'd spent years building a life that had now crumbled to dust, leaving me to sift through the remains and figure out how to start over. In the immediate aftermath, I wrestled with the idea of confronting Amanda about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the lies, and the sheer audacity of it all haunted me day and night. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it was a risk I could not afford to take. In my country, the laws heavily favor women in disputes of this nature, and without sufficient evidence, even making a single phone call could have landed me in prison for 5 to 6 years. The fear of losing what little freedom I had left was paralyzing. My internal struggles were compounded when, in February 2019, I suffered a severe injury that left me bedridden and in recovery for over a month. During that time, I was painfully reminded of how isolated I had become. The medical staff called my emergency contact, Emily, my ex-wife, but she hung up and never came to check on me. Lying there, alone and in pain, I realized the depth of the hole I was in. My funds had dwindled, my support system was non-existent, and I was entirely on my own. Once I was physically able, I made the difficult decision to leave everything behind. I sold all of my belongings, from furniture to personal items, and settled my overdue rent. With no emotional ties left in my current city, I moved 2 hours away to start anew. It was a leap of faith, but one I felt was necessary. The transition was brutal. I struggled to find steady employment, and as the days turned into weeks, I found myself sinking into a dark abyss. Alcohol became a crutch, and my thoughts frequently wandered to places I now shudder to recall. Nightmares plagued my sleep, and I often woke up drenched in sweat, haunted by visions of my past. 4 months into my move, a chance encounter altered the course of my life. I was wandering aimlessly through a crowded street when I heard someone call my name. Turning around, I saw David, an old classmate from college. Back then, David had been the quiet guy who preferred to keep to himself, so seeing him after all these years was both surprising and surreal. We exchanged pleasantries and quickly caught up on each other's lives. When I mentioned my struggle to find work, David revealed that he had recently left his job and was in the process of starting his own management consulting business. That same evening, he invited me for a drink, where we talked in depth about his plans. To my astonishment, he offered me a position on his team, explaining that he needed skilled individuals to help get the business off the ground. Although the offer was tempting, I wanted to ensure it was the right fit before committing. I told David I needed to meet the rest of his team and learn more about the venture. True to his word, 2 days later, he introduced me to Mark, his business partner. David explained that for now, it would just be the 3 of us. During that meeting, I decided to come clean. I laid everything out: my divorce, the false allegations, my disownment by my family, and the devastating losses I had endured. Tears streamed down my face as I recounted my story. To my relief, David and Mark were empathetic. They assured me that my past would not be an issue as long as I had no criminal record. I confirmed that I had never been formally accused or charged, and David promised to conduct a background check just to be certain. I understood his perspective and appreciated his honesty. The next 2 weeks were excruciating as I awaited the results of the background check while continuing my job search. Living in a rundown rental to save money, I braced myself for disappointment. But when David called to confirm that everything was clear, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. He welcomed me to the team, and I threw myself into the work with a determination I had not felt in years. At David's suggestion, I also began attending therapy sessions to address the emotional scars that had been holding me back. Additionally, I joined a gym where I found an outlet for my frustrations. The punching bag became my confidant, and over time, I went from weighing an average of 77 kilograms to a solid 105 kilograms. Mark, who was around the same age as my late brother, became a gym buddy and a mentor. In him, I found an older brother figure I never knew I needed. By the end of 2019, my life had taken a dramatic turn for the better. The consultancy business was thriving, and the steady income allowed me to move into a beautiful apartment in a respectable neighborhood. For the first time in years, I felt a semblance of stability. With David's encouragement, I took a significant step to reclaim my identity. With his and his parents' blessing, I legally changed my last name to Derek's, symbolizing a fresh start. His family welcomed me with open arms, treating me as one of their own. I even had the honor of serving as Mark's best man at his wedding, a gesture that meant the world to me. Dating, however, proved to be a challenge. My unresolved emotional baggage made it difficult to form meaningful connections. It was not until 2020 that I met Kim, a woman who would forever change my life. At 29 years old, Kim was a blend of Italian and Korean heritage, with a vibrant personality that matched her striking appearance. Meeting her felt like a beacon of hope, signaling that perhaps the darkest chapters of my life were finally behind me. At the small coffee shop I frequented for my daily caffeine fix, life seemed predictable. It was my routine: grab a cup of coffee, sometimes take a seat by the window, and lose myself in the view of people bustling about their day. That's where I first noticed her. She had this effortless grace, a quiet demeanor that drew attention without her trying. At first, it was nothing more than polite exchanges while she took my order. It was my friend Derek who gave me the push I needed. One afternoon, as we sat at a corner table, he nudged me and whispered, "She's been looking at you for a while now. Go talk to her." I dismissed it, thinking he was imagining things. Yet, when I glanced back, there she was, a subtle but unmistakable gaze in my direction. Gathering the courage, I struck up a conversation. Her name was Kim. That day, our interaction went beyond the usual order-taking routine. By the end of it, I found myself blurting out an invitation to drinks. To my surprise, she said yes. Our first date was magical. Effortless laughter, shared stories, and an undeniable connection. I was captivated, but as much as I enjoyed her company, a shadow loomed over me. I had been through this before. Dates that started with hope, but ended with disappointment when I shared the truth about my past. I always felt it was my responsibility to be upfront, to let the other person know what they were stepping into. So, on our second date during lunch, I decided to lay it all out for Kim. I told her about the charges, the estrangement from people I once trusted, and the long, painful process of letting go. My voice faltered as I confessed the darkest parts of my life, the accusations I faced, and the struggle to prove my innocence. I emphasized that I had never, and would never, harm anyone. Kim listened intently, her expression shifting between surprise and thoughtfulness. When I finished, I told her she deserved time to consider whether she wanted to continue seeing me. It was only fair. Days passed without a word, and I prepared myself for the usual outcome. Then, out of the blue, Kim called. She wanted to meet at the coffee shop where she worked. I remember the nerves that coursed through me as I approached her that day. She looked me in the eyes and said she trusted me. She wanted to try, to see where this could go. Her faith in me was overwhelming. I didn't know someone could accept me, scars and all. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I found myself sobbing in the middle of the shop. From then on, our relationship blossomed. Kim brought a sense of lightness to my life that I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, I allowed myself to believe in happiness. We made memories, lazy weekends at home, spontaneous adventures, and even a trip to Europe, my first vacation in years. It was a whirlwind of joy. During the pandemic in 2021, when physical distance kept so many apart, Kim and I stayed close through endless phone calls and FaceTime chats. We held on to each other, even when the world felt uncertain. By late 2021, life began to normalize, and Kim asked if she could move in with me. Her job at the coffee shop had ended, and she was struggling to find work. I welcomed the idea, eager to have her closer. She had a gift for cooking, and I suggested she consider starting her own food business. With support from her parents, she launched a cloud kitchen in mid-2022. Watching her business thrive was inspiring. It gave me hope, even as I continued to grapple with my mental health challenges. The intrusive thoughts that once plagued me began to fade, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. In February 2024, Kim shared news that left me speechless. She was pregnant. The emotions hit me like a tidal wave: grief for the family I had lost, fear of starting over, and immense joy at the thought of becoming a father. That night, Kim held me close, her reassurance soothing my turmoil. A few weeks later, I proposed, and she said yes. We began planning our wedding for mid-June. Life felt like it was finally falling into place. Then, at the end of May, everything changed. My phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Hesitant, I answered. On the other end, a woman's voice, shaky and tearful, introduced herself as Amanda. Her name was a dagger to my chest. I ended the call abruptly, rage boiling within me. Kim, noticing my distress, approached gently. I could barely find the words to explain who Amanda was. When the phone rang again, Kim answered. Amanda's fiancé was on the line, claiming Amanda wanted to confess something. I was too overwhelmed to speak. Kim handled the call, her calm composure a stark contrast to my inner turmoil. After hanging up, she immediately called Derek, who arrived within the hour. Together, we decided the best course of action was to involve a lawyer. We needed to document everything, just in case. 3 days later, we met Amanda and her fiancé at the attorney's office. Amanda looked defeated, her once confident demeanor shattered. My lawyer guided the conversation, ensuring every word was recorded. Amanda apologized, tears streaming down her face as she recounted her actions. Kim stayed close, offering her unwavering support as Amanda began detailing everything that had happened. She didn't hold back, recounting every aspect of the situation. The key takeaway? Back in 2016, my brother Michael and Amanda were secretly involved in an affair. Michael masterminded an elaborate scheme to frame me. He bought a new phone, swiped my profile picture from WhatsApp, and used it to create fabricated screenshots of fake chats between Amanda and me. Amanda, completely smitten with him, agreed to play along without hesitation. As Amanda spoke, I oscillated between overwhelming anger and the urge to break down in tears. Frankly, if Kim hadn't been sitting beside me, I might have lost control. Even my lawyer, who tried to remain professional, couldn't entirely hide his discomfort. Kim, on the other hand, was furious, and being pregnant only amplified her intensity. She lashed out at Amanda with a verbal onslaught so sharp, it left everyone in the room stunned. I managed to ask the burning question. Why now? Why come forward after all this time? Kim turned to Amanda's fiancé, Mark, and delivered a brutal warning. If you still choose to marry this person, you deserve whatever chaos comes next. Mark, visibly uncomfortable, explained that Amanda had drunkenly confessed a few weeks prior. She'd let slip that she had helped an ex ruin a marriage, and after some relentless questioning, Mark got the full story. He told Amanda that if she wanted any chance at peace, she needed to own up to her actions. Amanda admitted that after helping Michael execute his plan, he became distant and cold before ultimately ending their relationship 6 months later. She had spent years in therapy, consumed by guilt but too scared to come clean. Now she was finally ready to confront what she had done. Once Amanda finished her confession, my lawyer suggested a short break to let everything sink in. While Amanda and Mark stepped out, my lawyer outlined my legal options. He explained that I had ample evidence to pursue defamation charges against both Michael and Amanda. As tempting as it was to take immediate action, I decided that I wouldn't let this drama overshadow my wedding. I told my lawyer I'd deal with it after the ceremony and made Amanda promise not to share her confession with anyone else. Kim hugged me after the meeting, saying she finally felt validated for trusting her instincts. I felt the same sense of relief. When the wedding arrived, David and Derek stood by my side as my best men. Kim and I enjoyed a small, intimate ceremony before heading off to Europe for a 3-week honeymoon. The trip was incredible, but the nightmares still haunted me. I confided in my therapist, who suggested that closure would require confronting my past head-on. In July, I decided to reach out to Amanda again. I offered her a chance to avoid financial ruin, but made it clear that I was prepared to pursue legal action based on her confession. I instructed her to meet with Emily, our lawyer, and repeat everything she had shared with us. During that meeting, Amanda broke down in tears and admitted that Mark had left her. I couldn't muster any sympathy. I told her plainly that karma had finally caught up with her, and with Michael. A few days later, I received an unexpected message from Emily. For years, I'd sent her birthday greetings and holiday wishes, even though she had blocked me. After 8 years of silence, she wanted to talk. I waited until Kim was with me before making the call. As soon as Emily answered, I could hear her sobbing uncontrollably. When she finally calmed down, she apologized, admitting how terrible she felt about everything. I kept my composure and told her how much it had hurt, knowing she believed Michael's lies so easily. Finally, I asked about my daughters. They were doing great, she remarked with a faint smile, though her tone suggested there was more to the story than she was letting on. It was only 2 days ago that I had asked her how she had met Amanda. She hesitated before answering, her voice faltering slightly as she admitted it had taken her years to fully grasp how swiftly she had severed all contact with me. "I was wrong," she said, her eyes cast downward, as if the weight of her realization still lingered heavily on her. Emily confessed that after Amanda revealed what had happened to me, they were equally shocked and appalled. The details of my experience must have hit them hard because she said they all wanted to reach out to me immediately. Still, Emily insisted on being the first to apologize. "I needed to do this myself," she explained. There was a sincerity in her voice, but I wasn't sure if it was enough. "Your actions hurt me deeply," I told her, my voice firm but steady. She didn't flinch, simply nodding as if she knew that no apology could undo the past. "And what about Michael, the golden child?" I asked, the question slipping out almost involuntarily. Emily hesitated, her lips pressing into a thin line before she responded. "He's no longer living with them," she disclosed, her tone almost bitter. "They kicked him out of the house." That revelation made me laugh, though it wasn't out of joy. It was the kind of laughter born from years of bottled-up pain and ironic twists of fate. But before I could process that bombshell, Emily dropped another one. It turned out that Michael had been her main source of support during the years following our divorce. In fact, she had married him just a year after it was finalized. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, yet in some twisted way, it all began to make sense. Michael had never truly moved on from her. I could see that now. Then, with a trembling voice, Emily admitted that she and Michael had a daughter together. Another child, another life that had unfolded without me. After taking a deep breath, I outlined the terms of our future interactions. First, I told her she needed to contact my extended family and tell them the full truth about everything Michael had done, not just to me, but to everyone. They needed to understand the man he truly was. Second, I made it crystal clear that while I intended to co-parent our 2 daughters, Olivia and Chloe, there was no possibility of reconciliation between us beyond what was necessary for their sake. Third, I informed her that I planned to confront my parents face to face and would let her know the time and place. These were non-negotiable conditions. As our conversation drew to a close, I softened for a moment. Knowing that Kim's pregnancy had made her emotions volatile, I gave Emily a brief hug. Tears streamed down her face, but I held my composure. Kim cried for both of us, her empathy radiating in a way that left me in awe. That night, we fell asleep holding each other, though the weight of the day's revelations lingered like a shadow over our peace. The next morning, I woke up to find my phone completely dead. After plugging it in and letting it charge, I was overwhelmed by a flood of notifications. There were hundreds of text messages, over 150 missed calls, and countless alerts from apps I hadn't touched in years. Apparently, I had been added back to the family group chat. Messages of regret and apologies filled the chat log, each one more desperate than the last. Even old friends who had once abandoned me began reaching out, apologizing for their hasty judgments. In the family group, I sent one message. I'm an outsider now and will remain that way. You disowned me nearly a decade ago, and forgiveness will happen on my terms, not yours. After sending the message, I left the chat and made it clear I did not want to be added back. A few relatives tried to criticize me, calling my response harsh and disappointing, but I shut them down. You have no right to judge me after all these years, I said, ending the conversation decisively. Do not contact me again unless I reach out first. Weeks later, I invited Emily to visit with Olivia and Chloe. Kim, ever resilient despite the tensions brought on by her pregnancy, insisted on meeting her stepdaughters. I was hesitant at first, worried about the emotional toll it might take on her, but eventually I relented. We arranged to meet at a public park. Emily arrived looking disheveled, but trying her best to appear put together. It was the first time I had seen my daughters in 8 years. They had grown so much, taller, more mature, yet still carrying traces of the little girls I had once known. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she tried to hug me, but I raised my hands to stop her. No, I said firmly. Then I introduced her to Kim as my wife. Emily broke down completely, sobbing uncontrollably. Kim, ever empathetic, stepped forward to console her while I turned to my daughters. I embraced them both tightly, tears finally spilling from my own eyes. They were conflicted, having only ever known Michael as their father, but seeing me seemed to awaken a flood of emotions they had buried deep inside. There was a lot of crying and talking, the kind that lasts for hours and leaves you drained but somehow lighter. By nightfall, Emily and I were exchanging life updates. She told me how Michael had initially been a provider for her and the girls, but everything eventually fell apart. Their life together had been a facade, one that crumbled under the weight of its own deception. As the night drew to a close, I couldn't help but feel a mixture of pain and relief. The road ahead was unclear, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally reclaiming my life on my terms. Michael was forced to shut down his landscaping business completely due to the pandemic, and despite all his efforts, it never managed to turn a profit. It was heartbreaking to witness, but what made it even more painful was seeing his parents, who had already been through so much, dipping into their own savings to help him and keep the family afloat. Despite their sacrifices, Michael stubbornly refused to start anything new. He seemed trapped in his own frustration and despair, and there was no convincing him otherwise. It wasn't my place to interfere, but Emily later shared something that shocked me. She had decided to divorce Michael. She explained that it was no longer about the business failures or the financial struggles. She just couldn't bear to be around him anymore. She felt suffocated by his refusal to move forward, and I could tell it was taking a toll on her emotionally. When Emily told me about the divorce, I kept my reaction neutral. It wasn't my business to tell her what to do, so I simply said she should make whatever decision felt right for her and her daughter. While that chapter of her life was ending, I had already started laying the groundwork for the future I envisioned for myself and my family. The first step was collective healing. I reached out to Olivia and Chloe and suggested we attend family therapy together. I knew it was time for all of us to address the lingering grief and pain from losing their biological father. It was important to create a safe space where we could unpack those emotions and begin to heal. Second, I expressed my desire to spend more weekends with Kim and become more involved in her life. However, I made it clear that this plan would need to be put on hold until after the baby was born. For now, my priority was to cherish the remaining time before welcoming the new addition to our family. Amid all this, Emily mentioned something unexpected. My ex-parents had expressed an interest in reconnecting with me. I was stunned, and to be honest, I felt a wave of conflicting emotions. They weren't my parents anymore, at least not in the way that mattered. I still had the letter they had sent alongside the divorce papers, a clear declaration that they had disowned me. That moment had left a deep scar, and while I had done my best to move on, the pain lingered. Still, Emily and Kim both encouraged me to consider meeting them, saying it could bring me some sense of closure. Reluctantly, I agreed, but insisted that I would control the time and place of any meeting. To make things easier on everyone, I asked Emily to stay overnight in the city and booked a hotel for her. This allowed me to spend more time with Olivia and Chloe, something I deeply cherished. The following day, we explored the city together, visiting a few landmarks and enjoying ourselves. It was a rare and beautiful moment of connection, one I knew we all needed. When it was time to part ways, both Olivia and Chloe hugged me tightly. I promised them that I would see them again the following week, and they seemed genuinely happy about it. Before Emily left, I made another decision. I offered to attend Olivia and Chloe's family therapy sessions, sparing Emily the trouble of driving them back and forth. This small gesture felt like the right thing to do, and I hoped it would strengthen my bond with the girls. Our first session together went well, better than I had anticipated. The therapist suggested a local counselor for the girls in their city and provided some helpful recommendations for future sessions. During our discussions, the therapist also mentioned something that caught me off guard. Eventually, Olivia and Chloe would need to learn the truth about what Michael had done. At first, I hesitated. Revealing that part of the story felt like opening a Pandora's box, but deep down, I knew the therapist was right. The truth would come out one way or another, and it was better for them to hear it in a controlled, supportive environment. I agreed to discuss it when the time was right. The therapist also encouraged me to share my story here to gain insights and perspectives from others who might have faced similar situations. If I'm being honest, I don't think I would have made it this far without Derek's support. He pushed me to confront my fears and take steps toward healing, even when it felt impossible. So now, I'm left with a few lingering questions. What should I do next? How do I process these complicated feelings I still have for my ex-parents? I call them ex-parents, but the reality is that they still hold a place in my heart, even if it's buried under layers of hurt and resentment. Should I take legal action against Michael for defamation, or would that just add more unnecessary pain? I worry that anything I do could negatively impact his daughter, and I don't want her to suffer because of his mistakes. If you've made it this far, thank you for reading. I'm open to any advice, perspectives, or questions you may have. Right now, I'm just trying to navigate this tangled web of relationships and emotions, one step at a time.